Hey everyone, welcome to this MS-900 Microsoft Essentials overview video. I just took the MS-900. A few people asked me to create kind of an exam review video after the AZ-900 and the DP-900s. So I took the exam. I got just over 900. It was actually a fairly nice exam. It's very, very broad, but not deep at all. I think I had 42 questions and you had 60 minutes to actually answer those questions. It's a 90-minute exam, but you get 60 minutes to answer the questions. They're all very simple format. It's what would I use for X? Maybe it's select one option, maybe multiple options, maybe drag the type of service to the description. But that's it. There's no case studies, no labs. There's no negative points for getting something wrong. So make sure, even if you're not sure, often there's a couple of answers that can't possibly be right. So eliminate those and take an educated guess. It's better to take an educated guess and get it wrong than to not even try. At least you have a shot of maybe 50-50 getting some points. Again, we're going to be taking these at home most likely. So just a laptop with a single screen, a clear room. You take a photograph of yourself, your driving license, and then kind of the 4 directions of the room on your phone. And that's part of the exam process. And it's just proctored online. You just need kind of a camera looking at you while you take the exam. Relax. Often people say, hey, I'm terrified of taking the exam. I don't want to take it. What do you lose? If you take the exam and you fail, you've gained experience. You know what your weak points are. It tells you when you take the exam, it shows you afterwards in your school report, this is where you were strong, this is where you was weak. At least it gives you an idea of where to go and focus, and then you'll get it the next time. So my goal for this is I want to be fairly brief, just to go over the core areas. You need to go and do, there's some free online training you can take. Make sure you've got your hands actually in this stuff and trying it out. Look at the websites. I'm going to reference a few websites, show a few websites. Look at them. It'll help you understand kind of where the features are and what portals I might want to use. Now, because it is so broad, I'm going to take a fairly holistic kind of view at it. I'm going to think about what are the key areas and expand on each of them. So at the core of everything, there is an identity. So I have the identity actually of kind of the company user. So I have that identity there. When we talk about identity, what we really mean in the reality of kind of our Microsoft space is we have Azure AD. And so I'm going to have accounts for me in there. I'm going to have accounts for other people in my company in there. If I'm collaborating potentially with other people, well, people outside my company, they may be invited in as well as guests. And that's something we call B2B. So we may have those kind of objects in there as well, because what happens is I, as kind of a user, I want to collaborate with them. So they're the people we would invite into our Azure AD because I want to collaborate with them. But that's the first part. We have the identity. And then, well, I'm going to have some device. I'm going to draw kind of an old style kind of desktop machine, but it could also be kind of a mobile type device, a tablet. So we're going to have devices. And obviously those devices require some kind of management. If it's Windows, maybe that's kind of the System Center Configuration Manager. It could be Intune. If it's iOS, if it's Android, if it's Mac OS X, that's going to be Intune. If it's a server in my data center, then that's going to be Configuration Manager. So we have different solutions around these, but those devices might need management. I might need to be able to detect, is it jailbroken? I might want to set device level encryption options. So we have to kind of understand there's a device management aspect. Then on all of these things, no matter what it is, there's going to be some kind of operating system. So there's an OS on my mobile devices, on my regular desktop, on my laptop. That's where we think about things like, okay, well, it's Windows. If it's Windows, how do I get the new version of Windows? Windows as a service. Those semi-annual channels that constantly being delivered new functionality, feature releases. How do I get the OS on it in the first place? We hear things like Autopilot. So we have to think about the operating system. We have these layers. And then, okay, well, I've got that piece. Well, then what do we really do with that operating system? Well, we do the operating system so I can get applications. That's really what I care about. Again, be it a desktop, be it a mobile device. I care about the apps. So again, the applications have to be delivered. They have to be maintained. Intune. Intune's going to do that delivery for me. Or again, if it's Windows, I could use Configuration Manager. We often will have options. When we talk Windows, I can use Configuration Manager and Intune. Intune is kind of the cloud managed service. Configuration Manager is more the one that, hey, I'm managing Configuration Manager, I'm installing updates to Configuration Manager, but that can work for kind of server OSs as well. So I have to think about, well, those applications. And then the precious thing we often care the most about is the data. I have data on my mobile devices. I have data on my computer. I have data up in the cloud as well. And that data may need to be classified. Hey, it needs a certain sensitivity. It's PII, highly confidential. Maybe I have to keep it legally for a certain amount of time, retention. Or maybe I definitely don't want to keep it once it's past a certain age. I don't want the hassles of having data that I don't need to keep. So I want to make sure I delete it once it's past a certain age. And then, of course, after all of that, we have services. Out there in the cloud, we have various types of cloud service. We have things like infrastructure as a service. That's really a VM in the cloud. We have platform as a service. And in the office world, this is things like we have Power Automate. That used to be called Flow. That's really logic apps I can graphically drag sets of actions to perform. So in the office world, typically the only PaaS we're going to do is things like Power Automate. And then obviously there's software as a service. That's the main kind of Microsoft 365. When I think SharePoint Online, Exchange Online, the OneDrive for business hosting, all of those different capabilities, that's SaaS solutions. Those are providing me that. And across everything we're doing, really probably super important that everyone's consideration is compliance. At the end of everything, I need to make sure I'm compliant across my devices, my data, my applications, be it HIPAA or GDPR, no matter what that is, I have to make sure I'm compliant. So my goal is to fairly quickly try and touch on all of these aspects just to kind of bring them together a little bit. But you need to make sure you go and study these. Look at, hey, what's in the exam? What are they going to question me on? What's the details? So you can feel confident to, again, not super deep, but broad, talk about all these different aspects. So let's look at the identity first, and then we'll kind of go counterclockwise till we end up kind of on the data, the compliance side. So looking at that identity, so I can think about, okay, well, I have my identity, and my identity, I have an object in Azure AD. Now, I always have an object in Azure AD. If I'm an existing company, well, I probably already have an Active Directory. And in that Active Directory, I have my user objects. That is not good enough. I have to set up a replication so my objects get versions created in Azure AD. That's something called Azure AD Connect. So if I'm an existing company, I've probably got an AD, Active Directory Domain Services, ADDS. I have to get an Azure AD. If I was a brand new company and I was all in on the cloud going, hey, I don't have any legacy servers I have to worry about, I might just stand up an Azure AD, go cloud accounts, and just Azure AD join my desktops, join my devices. I don't have to have an AD if I was a brand new, fresh company. But if I'm hybrid, if I have on-prem and cloud, I'm going to have an AD that replicates to Azure AD. Now, to think about the management of this, if I'm managing my identities, if we're thinking about a Microsoft 365, then I obviously have the Microsoft 365 portal, and then there's actually the Azure AD portal as well. The benefit of kind of the Microsoft 365 portal, as I'm kind of showing it here, I can see all the various services. I can go and look at all of the other admin centers across Exchange and SharePoint and Teams. From the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, I could go and look at my users, for example. If I go and look at a certain user, let's say we go and look at Bruce Wayne. Well, for Bruce Wayne, I can actually go and see the licenses Bruce Wayne has assigned. So I can go and add and remove licenses. And then depending on what licenses they have, I can see the various apps that correlate to those licenses. So if I just wanted to see, well, what apps are associated with Microsoft 365 Basic, well, I can see, hey, I've got all of these different types of services available. Those Power Apps, Project, SharePoint plans, Sway, To Do. So go and look at this. Go and get an idea of what's available with the various licenses. It's actually a good way to get that knowledge. Or I could use the Azure AD portal. So here I'm going to aad.portal.azure.com. Once again, here I can look at the users, groups, licenses, and I get all of the same information. It's just laid out differently. But I can see again enabled services for those various licenses. Once again, I could go and turn them on or off, but it gives me that insight into what's available with them. So I have different interfaces to actually see that. Now, for the licensing Azure AD, there's actually 4 types of license. There's a free license, which as the name suggests is free. And then I get certain capabilities just for Office 365 applications. I can do company branding, self-server password reset for cloud users. I get an SLA, I get some device write back. And then there are P1 and P2. These are the premium SKUs. This is where I get key features like conditional access, MFA. I can actually do password write back for replicated accounts. And then on the premium P2, like Office as well, is where I get the more security-centric advanced features. I get here things like identity risk protection. It's going to go and detect, hey, there's risk to my sign-in, risk to my account. That can be very important. I can do privileged identity management. I can elevate up my permissions. I get access reviews. So that more advanced license, that P2, gives me that. Now, if I'm buying things like an enterprise, an E3, E3 gives me P1. If I do E5, it gets me P2. So these are often bundled together. So it's important to kind of understand exactly what the capabilities are and what license gives me what kind of feature. So my licensing is per user. So I can have different licenses for different types of user in my organization. Some might be on free. If you're obviously an Office org, they're all going to probably at least have Office. Some might have the P1, some might have the P2. I can go and license and give these out. When I think about capabilities, there's really 2 things I think they're going to focus on for this exam. The big one is kind of conditional access. And conditional access is all about saying, hey, for these sets of conditions, maybe it's a group I'm in, maybe it's an application I'm trying to access, maybe it's the location I'm from, maybe it's the health of my device, maybe it's a certain risk. I have all these different types of conditions. And then based on those conditions, what's required to let me in? Maybe it's just going to grant me access. Maybe it's going to block. Maybe it's going to require MFA. And this is kind of a big important one. If you see something like, hey, I want strong authentication, MFA. If you see MFA as an answer, it's going to be MFA. MFA is that multi-factor authentication. It's something I know, like a PIN or a password. It's something I have, which could be my laptop. It could be my phone. It's something I am, biometric, fingerprint, facial recognition. It requires two of them, multi-factor. That is a strong authentication type. Now, if I was using Windows Hello for Business, that is a strong authentication because the device has the TPM in it and it's a PIN or biometric. So those having the device and the PIN or the biometric is two factors. So that is a strong authentication. That counts. So if you see Hello for Business, that's also a strong authentication. So this MFA, we like this because it is a strong auth. And I can drive requiring that through conditional access. Again, Hello for Business is also a strong authentication as well. They're both kind of forms of strong auth. So remember kind of those key things about Azure AD. I have different portals, there's different SKUs. If I want MFA from Azure, it's P1 or above. I require that Azure AD P1 or P2, which is included in various types of bundles. For example, the E3, E5, business bundles as well. So if I actually go and look at the SKUs, so if we jump over, so the E3 and E5, it talks about kind of the different types of identities you want to kind of go through, and I'll come back to these later on. It talks about identity and access management, and I can see, oh, P1 plan. Yep, P1 is included for both E3 and E5. Great. And then it kind of talks about, okay, P2, well, that's only for E5. So I can actually go and see, well, what capabilities am I getting? Same for business. Oh, so it's up here at the top, but I can see security and compliance, support and deployment. There's all these different areas you can go to, but it kind of talks about those identity capabilities as well. So understand, go and take a look at these again, even education. There's education plans that show you, hey, what do I get in the various plans? So understand the different plans. It's going to kind of give you an idea. Azure Advanced Threat Protection, that's normally kind of a P2. Azure Advanced Threat Protection is where it does monitoring on your domain controllers. So if I wanted to say, hey, I want to detect threats against my on-prem domain controllers, or they could be in virtual machines, but it's Active Directory domain services. That solution is Azure ATP. It sends signals up to the cloud and will detect kind of attacks on your domain controllers. Pass the hash, golden ticket, DNS reconnaissance, etc., etc. So that's a service, and again, that's kind of a P2 type capability, the higher SKU feature there. I actually think ATP is part of E5, but again, go and check. That's the whole point. Go and look at the website, see what's included with the various SKUs. Okay, so then let's kind of look at the device side. And remember, when we think about devices, there's a whole set of types of device we have to think about. So there's things like Mac OS, there's iOS, there's Android, things we think traditionally about mobile devices, and of course there's Windows. I'm not going to put Windows Phone. I don't think anyone's using that. And when I think of these platforms, again, we're thinking about device management at this point. So for a cloud managed solution where I don't want to have to think about deploying management servers or anything like that, my solution is Intune. And once again, this is kind of part of the EMS suite of Microsoft 365. And this can manage all of these. Now I'm writing Windows. This is really Windows client when I think about Intune management. Because what this can do, it kind of goes both ways. So I can get inventory data. I can get kind of health state from this. But I can do app deployments. Now it's going to obviously depend on the platform. But I can do things like Win32 apps, MSIs. I can do deployments, for example, the MSIX. MSIX is kind of the new app format. It's containerized, so it's very clean. There's nothing kind of left behind if you uninstall it. It could be the UWP, kind of the AppX type formats there. And it can be things from the app stores. So the Apple and the Android app stores. I have the IDs. It can even be kind of the Windows Store for business. I can actually have my own line of business apps. I can add those in here and deploy those as well. So I can do all of this kind of app deployment. Now, we still have kind of configuration manager. So this was the old kind of, I say old, I mean, it's still valid. This was the original, maybe that's a better word, configuration manager. That was designed originally for really the on-prem management. So configuration manager, it really focuses on kind of Windows client, but it can also manage Windows server. So if I see something about, hey, I have devices on-prem, their Windows client, their Windows server, I can use configuration manager for that. But Intune is kind of that modern management. We're moving from things like configuration manager to Intune. We're moving from Active Directory joined to Azure AD joined. Or again, there's a hybrid. It can be AD and Azure AD joined. But we have these options for management. But if you see saying, hey, I want to manage mobile devices, it's going to be Intune. If I want a solution that's managed for me, that's hosted in the cloud, it's going to be Intune. And what they have actually done is to avoid some of this confusion, they're really bringing Intune and Configuration Manager together. And they're doing this Microsoft Endpoint Management. So this is really a combination. It's still separate products, but now I can think about they're trying to unify some consoles. So I go to a console and I can manage these together. So if you see Microsoft Endpoint Management, that's all about a unified view where we'll use the right tool depending on kind of where my devices are, what's the best way to manage them. So just remember from a device management, Intune, and I'm saying here sort of inventory, but one of the huge things we really have is also policy. So I can say, hey, I require this configuration, or I require this encryption. If it's jailbroken, I'm not going to accept it, because this Intune health status we can use for things like that conditional access. That conditional access can use things like the health state reported via Intune to control, will I actually let this device go and access this app, or will I block it? So these things actually work very, very closely together. But when I think about the device management, setting device encryption, whatever, hey, most likely it's going to be Intune. But if it was on-prem, it might be a legacy deployment, a hybrid deployment. Configuration manager definitely will play if it's server operating system, and potentially for those on-prem clients as well. So that's the device. Now I actually want to go and look at the operating system. So we'll kind of move outwards a bit. So we'll go back in. So now let's think about actually the OS. So we think about the operating system. Well, what does the OS entail? Well, I can think about it from an OS perspective. Obviously, you have to have the OS updated. So I think about Windows as a service. This was the move from major versions every 3 or 4 years, like XP to Vista to 7 to 10. So now it's just this constant stream of innovation every 6 months. It avoids those massive migration projects, and I don't have to wait 3 or 4 years to get functionality, which is really important when you think about some of the types of attacks now that are created. It requires changes to the OS that I can't do with a simple patch. So now it actually helps keep up and protect against new types of threat type. I have to actually get the OS onto the device itself initially. So that's things like Autopilot. I don't want to anymore do complete fresh builds of operating systems. I want to be able to deliver a device to someone, they unbox it, they stick it on the internet, they authenticate, and I'm done. That's Autopilot. And then of course the other option is, well, maybe a desktop in the cloud, which is Windows Virtual Desktop. Basically a hosted managed remote desktop services with either client or server-based desktops or just app publishing. So this runs in Azure. It gives me remote access to desktop applications. So let's kind of dive into this Windows as a service. So when I think about Windows as a service, there's two things I care about. I can think about quality updates, patches. And so these are delivered monthly. We think about kind of the whole Patch Tuesday. I think it's the second Tuesday of the month. So Patch Tuesday, Patch Day. And if we've been in the industry long enough, we remember, oh, Patch Tuesday, here's 50 new patches. I'll pick that one, that one, that one, that one. Which was a disaster, because it means every customer would have their own particular combination of patches. It doesn't do that anymore. This is now a cumulative patch. You don't pick anymore. You get all of them. And it grows. Every month it includes the previous months. Now you might say, well, over time this thing's going to get ridiculously large, and it would, except as we're going to see with the feature updates, a build is only supported for so long. But yes, after a year, there's 12 months of patches in that cumulative update. So it is bigger. So that's why we have to kind of refresh, and we support only so many builds. But to help combat this, there are things to help. There's something called an Express Update. So what Express Update does is this massive cumulative update. Let's say it's the end of a cycle. It's a gigabyte in size. But I have all the previous months. It only pulls down the bits that I actually need. Then there's other things. There's also things like delivery optimization. Delivery optimization says, well, maybe there's other peers on the network I can use. There might be things like branch cache. So there are various solutions to help optimize pulling those bits down. But this is a update monthly, gets me fixes. There's also some core critical security updates that may come out as well. But that's not delivering new features. That's making sure things are quality, fixing problems that are found. Then we do this we have feature updates. Feature updates, as the name suggests, this is delivering new value. And there are various channels available for this. There is, when I think about the channels, there is the SemiAnnual Channel. This is where most people will be. So we'll call that SAC. So every 6 months, we get a new semi-annual channel. There is also something called a long-term servicing channel. There'd be a version released every few years. This is aimed at, I have some device that I don't care about the new features. Maybe it's some kind of generator or an ATM. I want to get an OS on it, test, 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 and not touch it. That's what the long-term servicing channel is for. Now, there are many things missing. A lot of the UWP app, I don't have the UWP apps. I don't have Cortana. Office 365 Pro Plus will not be supported on long-term servicing channel. This is not designed for regular use. Now, there's also Insider. Now, the Insider builds are obviously released earlier, and it gives me an indication of kind of what's coming. This is what I want the majority. So this is what I want to focus on for my company, that semi-annual channel. That's going to get the new capabilities rolled out to my company. I want them to be able to leverage that. Now these are released, this semi-annual channel, in kind of spring and fall. So we can kind of think March and September. There used to be something called targeted. There used to be something called current branch for business, which was just the same build, just released a bit early. It was designed to try and help people to encourage some piloting. But people, I think, got confused, so that nomenclature has really been dropped. The key part is these are supported for a certain amount of time. These are really supported for 18 months. This one is 18 plus 12 for enterprise and edu. Because this really gives rise to the idea that as a company, I can pick, do I want to every 6 months get the new version, or maybe I don't want that. Because there's still app testing involved, there's still user testing involved. Maybe I just want to update once a year. So this extra 12 months gives me a little bit of leeway to say, hey, I'm just going to deploy the full update. I'm not going to worry about the spring. So that extra 12 months for the enterprise and education editions gives me that capability. Now, long-term servicing channel, that's the standard 5 years plus 5 years extended support. So 10 years in total. This is only available for enterprise edition. So if I'm anything other than that, and again, even if I have this, don't think about this for my regular desktops. We really want to be doing that Windows as a service. It is an ongoing motion. So if I think about how I use this, if I think kind of builds on the left, these are the various builds, and then this is kind of time, and we have kind of our 6-month gaps, okay? So we have a build, remember it's out and it's good for 18 months. Fine. So remember, maybe that's H120 and that's H2 and it's H121, H2, etc. So then the new build is available and then that's good for 6 months as well. Then there's another new build and that's good for 6 months as well. But hey, maybe this is the full build. So remember, the full build also has an extra 6 months extended support for that enterprise and kind of education. And then the spring one. So it's this constant kind of motion. There's all these new builds. Now, how I use this to remember, there's also the insider builds. So the insider build, well, it's probably available here for this build. There's an insider available here for that build. And there was an insider available for here. So I'm going to have rings of deployment. And this is kind of how I use these different builds. Because I can, for different populations in my company, I can delay the build for a certain amount of time. It's a fairly long amount of time I can actually delay these for. So what I'm going to think about for this is actually rings. So I want rings of deployment. The ring. So that insider build, I'm going to deploy that maybe for some test machines for my IT department. Because I want them to get exposed to kind of what's coming. And then once the actual semi-annual channel is released, I'll have a pilot group. So that's kind of more people. Now, this pilot group should be people from the business. So I want business users from each department. I want all departments and all apps represented. I'm not deploying it to everyone, maybe 1 or 2 people from each department, each app. The point is to test, to make sure, hey, this new semi-annual channel isn't breaking some app, breaking some process. So I want a good selection of people from my company to get the semi-annual channel in a pilot capacity to go and test through. And they need to know they're part of that pilot, so they know to go and do good testing, to go and test the processes to find if there were any problems. And then, well, then I kind of have the rollout. So it's still the same build, it's still the semi-annual channel, but now I'm going to do the rollout. So this is everyone. And so obviously you can see that the population is getting bigger. Now I've got kind of everyone involved, my whole company. So we have a very small number of people initially on kind of the insider. I have a subset of my population on the release semi-annual channel to pilot it. And now when I do the bulk rollout, I don't just do it on the same day. Within here, I would still have separate rings because maybe something got missed. Even if nothing's missed, even if it works perfectly, people will still get a little bit confused and icons changed and menus changed. They're going to call the help desk. I need to be able to manage that population calling my help desk. So I still deploy in rings, maybe over a period of a month or whatever, to support that. But realize if I overlay that process, so hey, I've got the pilot going on here, then I'm doing kind of the bulk rollout here, they overlay. At any one time, I'm doing maybe multiple phases. I've got some people on the insider, some people piloting, some people in the rollout. It's an ongoing process. Now we use tooling. We have tooling for things like Intune, Windows Update for Business. There's different ways to solve and to automate this. It's not like I'm manually doing things. It's all in-place upgrades. I don't do the old kind of style where I would capture the user state, capture the data, wipe the disk, put down the OS, try and work out the drivers, put the data and the profile back. We don't do that. It's an in-place upgrade for Windows 10. That is the preferred approach, just like what we would do at home. So I can automate all of these things, but I get the right tooling in place, I get the processes in place, I use kind of the optimization techniques because these feature updates can be delivered the same way as kind of those quality updates. So I use things like, hey, branch cache delivery optimization. I might pre-populate data. I optimize how the data is pulled down to make sure I'm not kind of conflicting. And again, I pick, am I going to do every 6 months? Or maybe I'll just do it once a year. So I'll just use the fall. I'm going to use the fall if I'm going to do it once a year because I want that extra bit of room in case there was a problem. Because realize if I use the 18-month, by the time you've done the piloting and you're rolling it out, if you found a problem, there's a very small window now if I skip a generation, if I skip a channel. So we would use that. So understand the idea of, hey, insider, I'm testing, I'm getting things in advance, then I'm going to roll it out in rings to the rest of my user population. Now, as we kind of did talk about at a high level, remember also we do have kind of the autopilot. So autopilot is that idea of, hey, I've got a new device, how do I get it corporate ready? So the point of autopilot is there's a number of phases to this. I have to kind of harvest the hardware ID of the machine, also called a hash. If it's a brand new machine, maybe the OEM can actually provide me those and I kind of bring them into Azure AD. If it's an existing machine, I can run scripts to gather those. So I bring those into my infrastructure. And then what we actually leverage is Azure AD. They're going to be Azure AD joined and Intune. So kind of Azure AD does a little bit initially, remember the device, just gets essentially unboxed. It's connected to the internet, and then the user does an authentication. That's it. That's all they do. And then Azure AD takes over, does some initial Azure AD join, gets it ready. Then Intune really does most of the work. Intune goes and pushes the policy to do configuration, encryption, certificates, VPN setup, these applications deployed. It creates the device for me. And then, how do you know if you're ready? Maybe I'm not on Windows 7 yet, Windows 10 yet. Maybe I'm on Windows 7, probably not on Vista. Hope not. So readiness, there are various tools available for you. The biggest one you're going to use is something called Desktop Analytics. What this does is there's telemetry. When I use Windows Update, there's telemetry sent about my drivers, my hardware, my applications. I can associate that telemetry with my organization. I, the administrator, can deploy a key to my machines. It will now associate with my org. I can then use all that telemetry and this vast database of information that Microsoft have built up to see, hey, based on all my machines, so I don't have to deploy any agent, it's just that telemetry, I can see this percentage are ready for Windows 10. This percentage have got these drivers, may be an issue. These applications, and there's a fantastic compatibility for Windows 10 apps. I think it's something like, is it 0.2? It's like 2 apps. I think for every 1,000 have a compatibility challenge. There's a whole team at Microsoft that will help you with that. But this desktop analytics will help you as the organization go and see, hey, for my population, who's ready for Windows 10? And then once you have that, well, are there any issues that go to the new semi-annual channels? And again, when you're on Windows 10, Azure AD joined is kind of the new preferred. Don't forget about Hello for Business. That's kind of that hero motion. If I can enable Hello for Business, that's that strong authentication. So if I can get this turned on, that's where it's that strong auth, it's the device, it's using the TPM, the Trusted Platform module. So it's something I have, the device, and then something I know, a PIN, or something I am, a biometric. So if I can, I really want to kind of get that on as much as possible. So that's thinking about the operating system. Okay, so now, so what layers have we done? Okay, great. So we have the device, the operating system. Now it's the application. And obviously when I'm thinking about application for Microsoft 365, what I'm really thinking about here is Office 365 Pro Plus. That is the, and obviously there's many other applications kind of in the world, but for right now, that's our focus, that Office 365 Pro Plus. Now the big deal with this is click to run. This is not an old style kind of MSI. It's using some of the App V technology. It's virtualized, it's containerized. It's very efficient, once again, with it as a delta binary compression to just pull down the bits that have changed. It's activated via the internet. So what that does mean is I have to connect every 30 days. So it's going to reactivate. So if I'm offline for more than 30 days, it's going to unactivate. It's going to go into a limited functionality mode. So I need to make sure, hey, I'm on the internet every kind of 30 days. It's a fairly big install. I think it's like 1.6 gigabytes in size, but that may obviously vary. And then I think for each language, there's another 200, 250 megabytes, because obviously it supports multiple languages. Once again, I have different channels available to me. Now, unlike the Windows as a service, there's actually a more frequent than a semi-annual channel. There's actually a monthly, and that's the minimum. It may actually be more frequent. And this is the one I want. I really want to be on that kind of monthly. Again, it's very efficient with how it pulls that down. There's also, because that can be more frequent, there's actually an enterprise monthly. And really, that's just making sure that only gets delivered once a month on Patch Tuesday. So if I care more about, hey, I want to make sure I control when these things are coming out, when I'm getting them, I can do an enterprise monthly. Then there is a semi-annual channel version if I just want it every 6 months. And then there is kind of a monthly kind of preview version of this. And then there is a semi-annual channel preview. Now, the monthly preview, I think, is at least 1 week in advance. This is 4 months in advance. So you get a lot of notice for the semi-annual channel version. Potentially, you may see the word targeted. That's been deprecated. We don't do that anymore. That's kind of a mess, sorry. We don't do that anymore. That's kind of the old terminology, but I don't know how often they update the exam. So if you saw targeted is really equivalent to kind of the preview. It was like for Windows, the branch for business, just an early thing for deployment. Because once again, for all of these things, no matter how I deploy, what do I want to deploy using? Well, I'm going to use rings again. We don't just deploy to everyone straight away. We're going to use rings. So when I think about how I did Windows as a service, the rings, I'm really going to do the same thing here as well. I'm going to have those rings of deployment. So there's Office 365 Pro Plus, but what exactly is Office 365? So if I have my Office 365 Pro Plus, what is it? Well, it's kind of the things we're used to. I have the whole kind of Word, Excel, PowerPoint. I can think about things like OneNote, Access. There's all kind of those various apps that are just part of that. I'm going to forget some, I'm sure. Obviously, we have things like Outlook. I want to be able to get to my email. Teams, our kind of collaboration. These are all clients. There's OneDrive. And I'll draw this in a different color. There's also there's Project and Visio. They are separately licensed. They are not just part of Office 365 Pro Plus. So they're kind of the apps. And again, the point of these is they're internet activated. They're constantly kind of being refreshed. You may also hear kind of Office and then a version like 2019. So that's kind of a static. It's not going to get new functionality throughout the year. It's going to use a key or a KMS for the activation. So it's not good. It's not connected to the internet, and again, it is that static, and it's a single purchase, so it's not a subscription. So maybe if I had some machines that couldn't, under any circumstances, connect to the internet, I could use that. But essentially, this is a point-in-time snapshot, a subset of the functionality we get in the Pro Plus, but it's not going to get anything new for years until the next major version comes out. So really, if we can, I want to think about this Pro Plus. Once again, there are various technologies to kind of optimize. There's that Delta compression. There are things I can do, integrate things like Configuration Manager to deploy these out. So I have lots of different ways to actually get this deployed to the organization. So now let's go back to where we are on our picture. I'll cover data in a second. Then we kind of think about the cloud services. Now, if you look at what's covered in the exam, it does actually mention IaaS. So it does kind of bring that up. So just super quickly, when I think about the services that are available in the cloud, you have IaaS. IaaS is essentially that there's layers. So I can think about there's the operating system, there's runtimes, there's middleware. IaaS includes all of those things. Then there's PaaS, Platform as a Service. There I'm really just thinking about my app and my data. I'm responsible for that with PaaS. And then SaaS, it's just kind of delivered for me. All of those things are managed. So with IaaS, I'm responsible for everything. So an example of an IaaS might be, hey, I'm installing SharePoint on Windows Server 2016. That would be an IaaS use case. If you see the words virtual machine, that's IaaS. In the office world, again, kind of this was flow, power, automate. That's really the only kind of PaaS you're doing in Office. Most of what you're going to do is kind of the Microsoft 365. These are SaaS. The Exchange Online, SharePoint Online. I'm not installing Exchange servers. I'm not installing SharePoint servers or patching them. It's just delivered. That's SaaS. That's the focus of really what we're doing. Now, if I extend these out, remember I showed you those URLs before. Go and look at what's in kind of the business, the education, the enterprise SKUs. There's different levels of SKU, different types available. So know what those are. Remember really the big difference, if I just focus on kind of the business and the enterprise, business is kind of less than or equal to 300 people. If I'm more than that, then I'm going to go to enterprise. That's going to kind of be that delineation between them. Now, once I have this, if I kind of think about Microsoft 365, what exactly is Microsoft 365? There's a whole bunch of services. So the big one, we think about Exchange Online. And that's one we're probably all very, very familiar with. And that's giving me my mailbox. I can send and receive email. There's other functionalities as well, but that's mail. And then I can think about, well, there's SharePoint Online. So this is our ability to create, for example, SharePoint Online, I can create team sites. Maybe we'll say intranet sites to not get it confusing. So I can create intranets. I can create kind of document repositories. So I want to make these things available. I can create custom apps and flows. It's a place for me to really have these various materials and sites available for people in my organization. Then we have Teams. So Teams gives me things like that, well, chat capabilities. I can do voice, depending on the SKUs I have. I can do voice and video. I can create these various capabilities to actually do collaboration. So I can create channels that I can have various tabs. I can have applications in there. I can store data, and it all brings back to kind of SharePoint. It uses SharePoint behind the scenes, that SharePoint Online. We have things like Yammer. I think of Yammer as maybe more of a social. Think of Teams. You'll hear the term inner circle, outer circle. Teams is for my inner circle, people I'm working with all the time. And then I think about Yammer as more outer. It's a broader type. I have these like social interactions. I can tag things. It's a good way to collaborate on a much broader scale. We have things like Stream. Stream is great for kind of video. It's going to create captions for those. It has some great AI kind of capabilities to say, well, this person's talking at this point, and it will actually separate those out. There's things like Delve to discover, hey, what's actually available, and kind of help me visualize what those things actually are. There's things like, obviously, OneDrive for Business. There's Project and Planner. Project is kind of that deeper project management. Planner is a lot simpler kind of capability there. And one of the other things you're going to kind of see is this analytics. And you'll kind of see this broken up into workplace and my. So my analytics, that's telling me how I'm spending my time. This amount of focus time, this is my personal work-life balance. It's just about me. Workplace analytics will aggregate that up for the organization. So I can see for my company, hey, I have a terrible work-life balance. Everyone's working 20 hours a day. They're never not responding to emails. So that can give me an idea of, hey, as an organization, how am I doing? So this feeds information from all of these things so I can get an idea of, well, how am I doing for my company? I'm analyzing the overall capability. And you might kind of have on-premises versions of these, and there are some differentiations. So Exchange Online, obviously I have kind of this idea of an unlimited storage. It has kind of native HA and backup just included with it. So there's features that I'm getting in there. And all of these, the whole point of kind of SaaS is, I'm just going to draw it, it's evergreen. And that applies to kind of all of them. I'm constantly getting new functionality. I could not on premises have a new delivery of Exchange server or SharePoint server every week. They can. So they're constantly updating. I'm constantly getting new innovations. You'll see emails around these things. And for SharePoint Online, I have things like claims-based auth that I can't do on-prem. I can do things like encryption at rest, just native to that. And there's things like anti-malware. So there's a whole set of things. You can look these up. It goes through. But have some idea. And all of these, there are things that I can do in the cloud that maybe I can't do on-prem. So have an idea of those capabilities. So evergreen, all those capabilities. So we have the concept of a roadmap. So I can think about, hey, there's this long road ahead. What actually is there? So I can think about, there are things that are in development. There are things that are kind of rolling out. And then I can actually just think about there's things that have landed. They're out there. And I can go and look at these. So if I go over to the web, there is a Microsoft 365 roadmap site. And on there, it's showing me things that are in development, things that are rolling out, things that are launched. So I can go and get all of the information about that. And what's really nice is if there's a feature that you don't see there that you want, well, I can go to 365 user voice. So user voice is where I can go. So if I have an idea and it's not there, so if I think about, hey, I have some suggestion, I'm going to go to user voice. That's my place to go. Say, hey, we should have this feature. Or if someone's got that feature already, I'm going to upvote it. Yes, that's important. And that's a good thing to do because Microsoft look at that, and depending on how many people are thumbs upping saying, yes, we want that feature, that's kind of going to get the priority. Now, if I think about the features, while it's in development, obviously there's no support. While it's in preview, there's no support. I kind of think about, I get support over here. And there are different levels of support. There's different types of impact. I can think, well, there's critical. I can think about there's high. And then I can just kind of think about, well, it's non-critical. If it's a critical problem, there's a 1 hour, so if I think about response, it's 1 hour, 24/7. That's across the board. I'm talking about if you have a support plan, a business or enterprise. But then it does actually, it's a different color. It does vary between business and enterprise. So critical is the same, but then it varies between high. So for business, basically what I'm going to get is from a response perspective. Let's just do that. I'm going to double check my numbers here. Okay, so for the response, there's no commitment in a timeline, and it's going to be business hours is when I can contact them. That's kind of when I can go and log, get support for that. If it's high and I'm an enterprise, well then the response is next day, but it is available 24/7. If it's non-critical, then the response is no time commitment, but it is 24/7. So that's kind of the difference in kind of these support options for me. So just again, go and look at documentation, go and look at the sites, get an idea around those. It's saying that it talks when again, if you go and look at the exam objectives, support is one of those things to understand what's supported and some of the different responses for the different levels of kind of criticality we might see. Okay, we're nearly at the end. This has gone way longer than I thought it would. They always do. I talk a lot. So look at our picture. Where are we in the scheme of things? So now I want to talk about the data, that top level part. So we'll jump over here to the left side, give us a bit of space. So when I think about data is really often what we care about the most. We don't really care about the app or the OS, we care about the data. I have to find the data, so I have to be able to discover the data. Then often I want to be able to classify it, and then I want to protect and monitor actually how it's used. So there's various phases, and there's different discovery tools. If you go and look at the Microsoft portal, there's a whole set of tools to help go and find the data. But I'm going to focus on kind of this classify and protect. Because what we can have is we can have labels. Now the first one I'm going to talk about is retention. So retention, I can apply a label, and it's really, I can do a label and I can do a policy. Label is kind of at an item level. This is more at a collection. Maybe it's an entire mailbox, for example. Maybe it's a SharePoint site, some sort of container. And I care about this because maybe I have to keep it for X time. Likewise, I may want to make sure I delete it. I do not want to keep it. Or maybe I need to keep for X time and then delete. And delete is as important as keep. Again, I want to make sure I don't keep things that I don't need to keep. There could be maybe legal ramifications with that. And then we think about sensitivity. Now with sensitivity labels, I want to keep it simple. So we have this whole thing about KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. I might have highly confidential, confidential, general, public. That's it. If you make them too complex, people will get confused, they won't bother classifying it. So I'm really going to try and keep it, so again, maybe it's that highly confidential, confidential, general, and public. That's it. You may have some others, but I want it as simple as possible. And I can think about these, maybe it's user assigned, maybe I give a tooltip. So what's great is I can create policies and rules if it detects a social security number, a credit card, PII. And again, highly confidential is often going to be things like PII. It's got someone's social security number, data about them, that's going to be highly confidential. I can automatically apply. Again, those same rules, they could give a tooltip, or they could actually say, hey, I'm going to apply it. And if it is automatic, maybe we let the user override it if they do a justification. So they can say, hey, no, because of X, and that will get audited, I'm changing that because it actually doesn't apply. I'm doing this with it. I've got these different things. Once I have these, though, once the data is classified with a sensitivity label, well, the whole point is I can then drive a set of actions. Now, that actions might be, hey, I'm going to control sharing. And that can even be things like the anonymous sharing I can do with SharePoint. Just say if you have the link, you can access it. I can stop that. So I can control the sharing. I could make it be encrypted. I could do things like a watermark. So it's going to have, hey, highly confidential, don't do stuff. I can control the actions I can perform. So maybe I can't print it. I can't copy and paste from it. I can't apply all. And these apply across a whole different set of solutions. Like in Teams, I could be chatting and I type in a credit card, it can stop me. I'm saving a document to my OneDrive for Business. It can actually say, hey, here's a tooltip. We think it should be this level. I can override it. I'm sending an email. So it really applies across the entire suite. And when I think about actually the way things apply and where they apply, something I kind of forgot to mention now I'm thinking about it. Talk about so many different things over here. When I think about all these different kind of tools here, when I think about capabilities, one of the really cool things SharePoint and Teams lets me do, and apologies for jumping around, but it's important, is it lets me do co-authoring. I'm just thinking about that. So if I'm in Word, Excel, or PowerPoint, I can co-author. If the document's kind of in the SharePoint or Teams, I actually see a little icon say, hey, John's editing over here. So Word, Excel, PowerPoint on those platforms actually let me do that co-authoring. Quick jump in my brain. But all of these capabilities, I can trigger off the sensitivity label, which can be set manually through guide them, or even just automatically set it. So data is super important. And then last, and it's not last in terms of important, just the last thing I'm going to cover. So I had this kind of compliance thing. And really, compliance does sit above everything. It applies to every aspect of what we do. So absolutely, at the top, covers everything, is that compliance. Now, there are many types of compliance things that I have to think about. There might be regulatory. So that could be things like HIPAA. There's huge numbers of these. There's things like FISMA, there's GDPR. Massive numbers of these. And the way I think about managing this, there is the Service Trust Portal. Now, from that portal, I can see a lot of different things. There is actually a compliance manager. Now, that compliance manager actually does things that Microsoft are responsible for, and it shows me that, and it shows me things that the customer is responsible for, and I can actually then tag, I can assign those things to people and actually track how I'm doing. Say, have I done that? So it will then feed into my overall compliance. So Compliance Manager helps me do that. I can actually assign, hey, this action goes to Bob. I can see things like my trust documents. So these are things that Microsoft maintain that I can go and see to see, well, how am I doing? So if I think about things like audits that we've had done, other types of maybe operational processes we have would be available in there. I can see things like my regional compliance. So there are things maybe in certain Europe, Asia, Australia, they will be in there. I can see things around privacy. So again, that might be GDPR is a big one around privacy. And also, there's a whole M365 compliance center. And also, there's kind of this secure score. So secure score shows me an overall score for my company and things I can do to improve it, like MFA is a big one. And it will show me how many points. So go and look at secure score for your company, look at its recommendations, look at its things that, hey, you need to remediate. Look at how many points you get. The more points, the more important it is to do. But super quickly, if I jump over, this is the Service Trust Portal. And here you can go and see, hey, audit reports for various types of actual compliance, and I can view all of them. And then it's got different documents and resources. So industry compliance, risk assessments, regional scores, and then the actual compliance center. And from the top over here, I can actually go to Compliance Manager, sign in. And here I can actually add different types of compliance things that I care about for my company. You can see right now I've got data protection baseline, but I could go and add an assessment and I can see all of these different ones will actually be available for me. It's just thinking, but these are all types of the various ISO ones available, NIST, etc. So I could add those, but then I can go and look at the baseline and it will show me scores I have, scores that Microsoft are responsible, and it will break those down. So right now it's still kind of thinking, it's a bit like me on a Sunday. But hey, look, I can see all these different things. Owner, customer, all of those different things that I might need to do. So I could go and select one of those, I could review it, I could assign it to a user. I could say, well, here's where we are in the plan. So this isn't just telling me stuff to do, it's actually a tool I can use to track my overall compliance. So go and look at all of these resources. So this was what we covered. And I totally get it, there's a lot of stuff here. Go through the online trainings, go and look at the exam objectives. This is kind of an all-up review. There's things in here I talked about that may be confusing. Again, I'm doing a lot of this from memory. So if I talked about certain facts and what things are in, look at the website, see what's in the different SKUs. Relax. Go and take the exams. If you don't pass, the only real failure is to not try again. We all fail at things. That's totally cool. We learn from that and we go and do better next time. So good luck, do great, and I'll see you on the next video.